picture from the depths of a crystal ball. Various Romany aunts and cousins had helped out for a summer season here and there, but the booth belonged to Shanti May, and now she was handing it over to her only daughter. Today, Imelda became Madame Burova, tarot reader, palmist and clairvoyant. She drew back the curtains to let the early morning sunlight stream in. Shanti May was in the back garden by the open door of her caravan, smoking a cigarette and cursing. Now in her early 70s, she was still an extraordinarily striking woman, with sea-green eyes and only whispers of silver in her long black hair. She had left her travelling life behind when she married Imelda's father, Alexei, but had flatly refused to give up her traditional gypsy vardo and insisted on keeping it in the garden. Whenever she and Alexei rowed, she stormed off to the vardo and often slept there. Imelda could hear the clatter of pots and pans and her father whistling in the kitchen downstairs as he prepared to cook breakfast. He had a fiery temper that was easily a match for Shanti May's passionate outbursts, but whereas his anger was quickly spent and soon forgotten, his wife's could sometimes smoulder like hot coals and flare again at the slightest provocation. Alexei was a successful tailor with his own shop, but a gorger, a non-Romany, and Shanti May's family had objected vehemently and vocally when their courtship was discovered. The pair had eventually eloped, and faced with a fait accompli, the Romany relatives grudgingly accepted the marriage. Their love for one another was immutable, but their life together a volatile alliance of disparate cultures and traditions. There was a groan from beneath the rumpled covers of Imelda's bed, and a long, pointed nose appeared. "Get up, you lazy hound!" Two soulful brown eyes and a pair of furry, floppy ears emerged, followed by a wriggling body on gangly legs with a crazily wagging tail. Imelda had found the puppy a few weeks ago, scavenging in the bins along the promenade. He was painfully thin, and his feet were sore and bleeding. But his sorrowful gaze was irresistible, and Imelda was instantly smitten. She took him home. Shanti May had not been happy, but Alexei had been delighted. "He's a borzoi," he had declared, "a fellow Russian." "It's a dog," Shanti May had objected. "It's probably got fleas." Imelda rarely crossed her mother, but when Shanti May had told her to get rid of the puppy, she had been adamant. "If he goes, I go with him." Shanti May had eventually yielded, fearful of losing her daughter and knowing that this was a battle she would not win. But she attempted to dignify her capitulation by disguising it as oblivion. She simply refused to acknowledge Grisha's existence and completely ignored him. Shanti May had given birth to 4 sons before her longed-for and only daughter eventually arrived, and it was clear from the start that Imelda had inherited her mother's independent spirit and stubborn streak. The first word she had spoken was "no." Imelda hurried downstairs, followed closely by the now wide-awake puppy, who skittered into the kitchen and immediately sat down at the feet of Alexei, who was frying eggs for Imelda's breakfast. "You need a good meal inside you, Imelda. It's a big day." Imelda poured herself a mug of tea and sat down at the table. "Why's Mum in the vardo?" Alexei served her 2 eggs on toast and smiled. "I told her not to go to the booth today, to let you have your first day as the queen bee in peace." Grisha had squeezed underneath the table and was nudging Imelda's knee with his nose. She slipped him a small piece of toast. "I take it she didn't welcome your advice, Papa?" Alexei sat down opposite her and took a deep draught from his mug of tea. "She said that I obviously thought she was an ugly, interfering old woman of no more use to anyone, and that next I'd be plotting to have her put in a home and then I'd run off with some gorger floozy." "I said cheap gorger floozy." Shanti May was at the back door listening. She walked over to her husband and looped her arms lovingly around his neck before planting a kiss on the top of his head. "But now I forgive you, if you cook me some eggs." Imelda glanced up at the clock on the wall. It was 8 o'clock, and time for her to leave. She wanted to be at the booth early and savour every moment of her first day of sovereignty. She fed a final piece of toast to Grisha whilst her mother struggled valiantly not to notice, and then grabbed her bag, coat and puppy and swept off down the hallway. Madame Burova was on her way. Jeannie peered into the mirror and wondered if she could get away with a bit more